everybody, and welcome to the long-awaited video, The Basics of Watercolor. In this video, I will go over the basic supplies needed for this amazing medium and some techniques that will help you on your artistic journey. First, let's go over the supplies and how they work. First, watercolor paint. There are tons of different sets and brands out there, but all of those fall under two basic categories, pans and tubes. The difference is that the tubes are in, well, a tube and can be squeezed out into a container called a pan, or be directly diluted with water before use. Pans, however, are manufactured pieces of plastic filled with the paint by extrusion, which calls for making a paste and cutting it before placing it, or directly filling them with the paint, like from the tube, and allowing it to dry. There are advantages of both. With pans, you get portability and easy access. With tubes, you can get pure pigment and be able to use the paint for larger areas. The paints themselves can fall under three other categories of their quality. There's artists, or professional grade, student grade, and scholastic grade. Artist quality is more expensive, has less filler and more pigment, has purer pigments rather than stains or dyes. Student quality is affordable and is almost as vibrant as artist grade, but has a little bit more filler and uses dyes and stains as well. Scholastic grade isn't even really watercolor paint. It comes in cakes, which can be either super chalky and dry or super moist and sticky. They are dirt cheap, and I don't even know what they're made of. What is filler, you ask? It's sort of a substance that sort of dilutes a paint while still keeping it a paint. More filler can make the paint more opaque, and artist quality uses almost no filler, so the paint is more transparent. A good way to test how opaque a watercolor paint is to simply draw a thick black line and paint over it. If you can see the pigment sitting on top of the black line when it's dry, it's more opaque. If not, it's a transparent color. Both pans and tubes come in different sizes. Pans can come in whole pans, half pans, and quarter pans. Albeit, I'm only aware of one brand that does the whole quarter pan thing. Anyway, tubes can come in sizes ranging from 5 milliliters to over 30 milliliters. If you want to use tubes, you will need a palette to squeeze out the paint into. I suggest using a Magello Airtight watercolor palette. It's nice and portable and can hold 18 colors in its wells. Pans can be obtained individually and arranged in watercolor boxes, like this one from Winsor & Newton, or bought in a set. Sets of pans and tubes can range from 6 to 72 colors. Second supply item, brushes. Brushes, the delicate tools of an artist. These hairy sticks are a lot more complicated than they seem. Brushes are made of a handle, ferrule, and bristles. What differentiates the quality of the brush is the quality of the brushes and the ferrule. The bristles can be made up of natural hair, synthetic hair, or a mix of the two. Natural hair brushes can be a bit floppier, and hairs can fall out a bit easily, and they're also more expensive. However, natural hair brushes can hold tons of water and pigment and come to a nice sharp point, which can be useful for fine details. Synthetic hair is a bit stiffer and springier, cheaper, and will last a long time, as long as you properly clean your brush. However, they don't hold as much water and pigment. Now to the ferrule, the metal that connects the bristles to the handle. When using watercolor, you have to take care of your ferrule, or your brush will fall apart. To properly take care of your ferrule, don't leave it submerged in water for too long. The water can dissolve the glue holding it to the handle and render the brush useless. Also, if you leave it face down in a water jar, it can permanently bend the bristles over time. One more thing, don't let watercolor paint get stuck at the bottom of the bristles near the ferrule. It will dry and build up inside the ferrule until your bristles look like Albert Einstein. Brushes can come with long, short, or travel handles. Travel brushes can be collapsed and become more portable, but sometimes when reassembled, the ferrule could fall off the handle. Short brushes are the most common and don't waste materials making the handle and feel more balanced. Long-handled brushes are fancy AF. They are too cool for you, but if you want to try and talk to them, go on ahead. The bristles on brushes can be arranged in manufacturing to make different shapes. The shapes are round, detail, liner, script, natural mop, quill mop, flat, comb, fan, filbert, dagger, and angular. The round brush is the most common and most versatile and can be used for both large washes and fine details. One more quick tip for you guys. When you dry off your brush, don't pull up the bristles. This will cause them to fall out. Instead, dab them on a rag or paper towel. Next, paper. There are 3 types of watercolor paper: hot press, cold press, and rough. Hot press is extremely smooth with almost no tooth. I don't have any with me, so just think of printer paper. Hot press can't hold as much water and is more likely to warp and become torn if an area is too wet. Cold press is a bit rougher with more texture and is also the most common. It can hold a great amount of water but can warp slightly. Rough is the bodybuilder of the bunch. It's super bumpy, textured, and doesn't mess around. Also, they're usually thicker and can absorb a ton of water. I know what you're thinking, do I have to use watercolor paper? Well, long answer, your watercolors will work the best on paper that was designed for it. If you use it on standard paper, it will tear and warp and make a huge mess. But I'm not your mother. Use regular paper if you want to, but don't come running when your brush punches through the paper. Short answer, yes, use watercolor paper. The paper can come in 3 different forms: blocks, pads, and sheets. Blocks are pads of watercolor paper that have been stacked on each other and glued down, save one little piece. You directly paint on top of the piece of paper, and when you're done, simply cut with an X-Acto all the way around. Pads are similar to blocks, but are only glued on one side, and pieces can be worked on under other ones, and the paper can be removed by hand. Watercolor sheets are just sheets. Sheets of watercolor paper. Super useful when you want really big pieces. I would recommend learning on cold press paper and then trying out the others after you get the hang of it. One last thing you might need for your amazing work is pencils and pens. For pencils, get ones that can be easily be erased or be faint by themselves. You want to be able to see the lines while working, but not have them distracting in the picture. Also, some people like to ink their paintings, preferably after they're done. You can do that with dip pens, artist pens, or even colored pencils. Another useful tool is a white gel pen, which can add nice bright highlights and bring the whole piece together. Gel pens can come in other colors too, and even metallic ones, which can add nice effects. Okay, last quick supply thing before we get to techniques. Have 2 water jars. One for clean water to activate your paints, and one to clean your brush. Now for some techniques in watercolor. First, we're going to tape down our watercolor paper using artists or masking tape. This will ensure that our paper doesn't move while working and minimize warping. I'll be showing you 14 different techniques, so we will divide our paper into 14 sections. The first technique is wet on dry, where you dip in your brush with water in the paint and directly paint on the paper. Wet on wet calls for laying down water first, then dropping in the pigment. You can tilt the paper to evenly distribute the pigment if you wish. Washes are sections of flat color, and can be accomplished by both wet on dry and wet on wet techniques, but requires some finessing to evenly distribute pigment across a wide area. Some of the techniques requires 2 steps, so I'll explain part of it now and part of it later. Glazing is the most important technique. Here I have laid down a wash, and I will later complete the second step when it's dry. The wet on wet technique can be used with multiple colors, or include colors being dropped onto others. You can mask the paper using masking tape or masking fluid. After the masking fluid is dry, you can paint over it, but I'll show that later. Lifting is another 2-step technique. Simply lay down color and let it dry. We'll get back to it later. A quick and easy way to bring life and spontaneity to your painting is using a splatter technique. This can be done by loading up a brush and flicking the handle on the back of your finger. But be careful, it's hard to control. Another way to create splatter is with a toothbrush. Yes, a toothbrush. Simply load the bristles and then run your fingers across them towards yourself. This creates a finer spray and is more controllable. Another cool effect is using a straw to move the paint. Lay down some color, point the straw at it, and blow away. But don't overexert yourself. Take breaks between blowing and don't do it for too long. For the gradient technique, this calls for slowly transitioning from one color to water or from one color to another. This can be accomplished by adding more and more water to your brush or more and more of the other color. The bleeding technique is a toned down version of a gradient. This is commonly created as an accident and it occurs when 2 wet colors are too close together and end up bleeding into each other. To avoid it if you don't want it, wait for a color to dry before placing another next to it. Another 2-step technique is using salt. Yes, I'm aware it's a spice, but salt naturally absorbs water, so that's why it can be used with watercolor. Simply lay down color and drop salt onto it. I'll show you the second step in a bit. Our last effect is similar to the salt one. Lay down some color, but then take some plastic wrap, scrunch it up a bit, and lay it on top of the paint and allow it to dry. Then remove the wrap. And now we're back to the glazing technique. After that first layer had dried, I applied a second layer so you can see both individual colors on the paper, but see them layered on each other as well. Now let's finish the lifting technique. After drying, I took a wet brush and scrubbed the paint and lifted it off with a rag, exposing more paper. And now back to the masking technique. After the masking fluid dried, I painted over that area. We'll have to wait until the paint is dry until we can see the magic it did. Now for the salt, simply gently rub it off. Now that the paint for masking fluid is dry, we can peel off the masking fluid, revealing the protected white paper underneath. And there are some basic techniques for watercolor. You can combine and experiment to find different effects. And lastly, I will go over some basic tips for everybody. Be patient. Your layers have to dry before you can continue. If you don't do it perfectly on the first time, try again. Practice is a necessary tool. Start out with affordable materials before you upgrade, and really make sure what you're buying and how to use it. Lastly, believe in yourself. Did Leonardo da Vinci instantly know how to paint the Mona Lisa when he was fresh out of the womb like a little baby? No! He learned, and he grew in his talents. Drawing and painting is an acquired skill. When you practice and hone, anyone can become a legendary artist if they commit to it. So there you have it, the basics of watercolor. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. As always, have a great rest of your day and keep on arting. Woo!